Detachment is considered an essential skill in almost all spiritual traditions. On the surface, detachment means aloofness from worldly affairs, or it means detaching from your own passions and desires. And that can be very healthy, especially if you're attached to something bad or to something harmful to you, like a drug addiction or an anger habit, or just self-centeredness or selfishness. So if you find your actions are ruled by your passions and attachments instead of by reason, then you might need some detachment. And nearly all spiritual traditions advocate fasting and other austerities to help you detach from unruly passions or attachments. So healthy detachment is when you have enough detachment that you can do the right thing with the right attitude, such as letting go of your kids enough that you're detached from your own selfishness so that you can remain attached to loving what is good for them, right? The proper way to love your children is to love what's good for them, not what's good for you, right? An unhealthy kind of attachment would be when nothing seems to matter anymore. Like if you've let go of your kids so much that you don't really care what happens to them, would be an extreme case. But that kind of detachment can, I think, more typically creep into our primary relationships, such as with a spouse or a friend, and or a parent, where we forget to love them and just detach our emotions from them. So in excess, detachment can make a person indifferent or passionless. They can lose all sense of desire and aversion in a particular for a particular circumstance or situation, not necessarily in their entire life, but as I mentioned, in their relationship. And when a person loses that desire and aversion and becomes indifferent, they lose their instincts in the situation. And also they lose their motivation. Things start to seem meaningless. And I always think of that as the end stage of a relationship, right? When a person loves you, that's great. When they hate you, they're still kind of attached to you. But when they're indifferent, then it's over, right? The relationship is over. So when a person goes too far to eliminate their appetites, passions, and attachments, they can lose their sense of identity, and that can lead to a bit of identity crisis. Actually, on a personal note, this was a big reason, a primary reason why I returned to my Christian faith after following years of yoga spirituality. I have a lot of vata in my constitution, or at least in my mind, and I really enjoy that kind of universal thinking and philosophy, and so I got really into yoga and Buddhist detachment, probably too much for my constitution. So I became detached, and this destabilized my life, and I became confused about the direction of my life. I was, on one hand taking big risks, but on the other hand, it all seemed meaningless to me. And so I really had to take a step back, and it helped me. What helped me is to worship an incarnated God, which means Jesus for Christians, and that brought me back to some of those stable, earthy qualities that I needed for my body type. So in a way, I'm a little bit talking about what happened to me and how it made me indifferent and passionless. So, when are attachments good? When should attachments be encouraged? Well, on some level, attachments form the identity of the person. Again, I'm not making a deep philosophical claim there. I want to make sure that I'm leaving room for more precise definition of the identity of a person, but I'm speaking more on a basic everyday level. Are the things we do and the things we're attached to have a big effect on our identity. So our identity is formed by what we cherish, what we treasure, and remembering our identity and what we cherish is grounding, and that's very nurturing. It helps us to nurture those things that we cherish and treasure. So through our passions, through our desires, through our aversions, we become rooted in a time and in a place, forming attachments to people and places. I always think, because we live in the mountains of western North Carolina, I always think of the communities that live in that holler over there. That what's called a holler in these parts means a little valley in the mountain. And there may be a community in there that everybody knows each other, and people are very rooted there. That's their home. That's the place that they know and where everything is familiar. So happiness, even I think attachments are necessary for happiness. I know this flies in the face of some of the claims of some spiritual traditions that bliss comes from detachment from happiness. But I'm going to say that happiness, joy, and delight come from possession of something that we love. And that something could be God, right? It doesn't have to be a physical thing. It could be a spiritual object, or at least a vision of that thing, right? We can't grab God and hold him. He's big, right? Or too small, or one of those, right? But at least if we have a vision of that thing that we love, then that is a great consolation to the heart and creates a lot of happiness. And I would say also that indifference cannot lead to happiness. And again, those are statements that I'm making that other spiritual traditions would, have claimed the opposite. And that is beyond my comprehension. I can't comprehend why the opposite would be true. It seems to me that indifference cannot lead to happiness. Maybe, or at least how I resolve this in my mind, is that detachment should be followed by attachment in a two-stage process. That first you would detach from what is bad and harmful, and second, you would attach to what is good and healthy. And Ayurveda in general is always about balance, right? It's always going to ask for who, when, and how much when assessing the right amount of attachment and detachment. Another question that I'd like to ask about detachment on the subject of love. What is your love focused on? Do you focus your love on universal love or loving a particular person? So a person with a lot of subtle quality might focus on universal love as opposed to love for a particular person. Might focus on loving all of humanity. This is a question you can ask yourself. Should you focus on loving all of humanity, or on cherishing your wife in particular, or your husband, or a sister, or a brother, or a mom, or a dad? What has more value to you, the whole universe or a person? And I know it's a funny question to ask, because we could say that the whole universe is worth more than a person because the person's in that universe, right? But in another way of thinking, this person right here is worthy of all of my love. And if I tried to love the whole universe, I there just wouldn't be enough of me. And instead, what a beautiful thing to give your whole self to someone, right? So perhaps the answer is a bit of both. Maybe we need to give some attention to loving all of humanity and the entire planet, and some of our attention given to loving the person we're with. And I think that phrase called think global, act local is a way of recognizing that our actions have global effect, but also that our actions should be focused locally and very personally. So here are some antidotes to being excessively detached. It can be simple as a devotional practice to something in particular. That's an antidote to if you're excessively detached. Or cherishing a face, cherishing a person you love. Something called adoration in my spiritual tradition is where we are cherishing the face of God, right? Cherishing the face of Jesus Christ. And so that's a practice of attachment. Cherishing is a practice of attachment as opposed to a practice of detachment. Cherishing can help a person to commit. It can help a person achieve greater forgiveness of others' faults. It creates stable quality because you're focused on something in particular. And it can be very rooting. So yeah, spiritually, cherishing and devotion is the opposite of a practice of detachment. All right, let's talk about some more treatments in lifestyle, diet, and herbs for aggravated subtle quality.